It started with war, ended with oil, and crowned one currency king over the world. From international trade to your local currency exchange, it's the king of currencies. But how did it get this top spot? It wasn't by accident, and it's a fascinating story of power, strategy, and a bit of luck. Let's dive into how the US dollar became the world's reserve currency. To understand the dollar's rise, we first need to rewind the clock. Before the dollar, the British pound sterling was the big boss, thanks to the vast British Empire and its global trade network. The pound was the currency everyone trusted for international transactions. This was the era of the gold standard, where a country's currency was directly linked to a specific amount of gold. You could, in theory, walk into a bank and exchange your paper money for actual gold. This system provided stability and confidence. But then the world was rocked by two major events: World War I and the Great Depression. These crises shattered the global economy. Countries, including Britain, had to abandon the gold standard to print more money to fund their war efforts and combat economic collapse. This led to instability and a loss of faith in many currencies, including the once mighty pound. Britain was heavily in debt. Its empire was shrinking, and its economic dominance was fading. The world needed a new anchor, a new currency to trust. Enter the United States. While Europe was rebuilding from the devastation of war, the US was in a unique position. It was geographically isolated from the main conflict, its industries were booming, and it had accumulated a massive amount of the world's gold reserves. By the end of World War II, the US held about 2/3 of the world's official gold supply. This immense economic power set the stage for a major shift. The pivotal moment came in July 1944, as World War II was nearing its end. Delegates from 44 Allied nations gathered in a small town in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods. Their mission: to design a new international economic system that would prevent the kind of chaos that had led to the war. They needed stability, and they needed a reliable system for international trade. At this conference, the Bretton Woods Agreement was born. It was a brilliant and strategic move, largely orchestrated by the United States. Here's how it worked. The US dollar was pegged to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. Other countries then pegged their own currencies to the US dollar. In essence, the dollar became the new gold standard, but with a twist. It was the only currency directly convertible to gold, making it the central pillar of the entire system. Why did other countries agree to this? Well, they desperately needed stability and access to the booming US market. The US had the gold, the economic might, and a plan that, by linking their currencies to the dollar, other nations gained a stable exchange rate, which made international trade much more predictable and secure. This system effectively crowned the US dollar as the world's primary reserve currency. Central banks around the globe started holding large amounts of dollars in their reserves because it was seen as good as gold. The Bretton Woods system worked remarkably well for about 25 years, a period often called the Golden Age of capitalism. It facilitated unprecedented global economic growth and stability. However, cracks started to appear in the late 1960s. The US was spending heavily on the Vietnam War and domestic social programs, leading to inflation. This meant there were more dollars circulating in the world than could be backed by the US gold reserves at the fixed price of $35 an ounce. Other countries, particularly France, grew skeptical. They started to question whether the US could actually honor its promise to convert dollars to gold. So, they began to cash in their dollars for gold, draining the US reserves. This put immense pressure on the system. The US was facing a dilemma. Either raise the price of gold, which would devalue the dollar, or abandon the gold link altogether. The moment of truth came on August 15, 1971. President Richard Nixon made a shocking announcement that became known as the Nixon shock. He unilaterally suspended the direct convertibility of the US dollar to gold. This decision effectively ended the Bretton Woods system. You might think this would be the end of the dollar's reign. Right. If it's not backed by gold, why would anyone trust it? But here's where things get really interesting. Instead of collapsing, the dollar's dominance actually solidified, but for a different reason. The world had become so accustomed to using dollars for everything, from buying oil to settling international debts, that there was no easy alternative. The global financial system was already built around the dollar. Then came another masterstroke, the petrodollar system. In the early 1970s, the US struck a deal with Saudi Arabia and other major oil-producing nations in OPEC. The agreement was simple. They would sell their oil exclusively in US dollars. In return, the US would provide military protection and support. Since every country needs oil, every country now needed US dollars to buy it. This created a massive, constant global demand for dollars, ensuring its place as the top reserve currency even without the gold backing. So, what does it mean for the dollar to be the world's reserve currency today? It means most international trade is priced and settled in dollars. It means central banks hold dollars as a stable store of value. It gives the US what some have called an exorbitant privilege, because there's such high demand for dollars. The US can borrow money more cheaply and run large trade deficits without the same consequences other countries would face. However, the story isn't over. In recent years, there's been growing talk about countries like China and Russia are actively trying to reduce their reliance on the dollar, promoting their own currencies or alternative systems for international trade. The rise of digital currencies could also change the game. Will the dollar's reign continue, or will we see a multi-currency world in the future? Only time will tell. And that's the epic journey of how a national currency became the world's financial backbone. From the ashes of war and the brilliance of Bretton Woods to the strategic petrodollar system. The dollar's story is a testament to economic power and political strategy. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into how our world works. The dollar's empire wasn't built, it was engineered.